declared chemical weapons out of Syria.
What is true is Assad got rid of his chemical weapons.
Activists in Syria say at least 20 people have been killed in a suspected chemical attack. It happened in the rebel-held town of Khan Sheikhoun in Idlib province. Now, the civil defense organization known as the White Helmets released these photographs and have described it as a toxic gas attack.
What matters here is the evidence and the facts. If President Assad is found to be responsible after an independent investigation for these horrific chemical weapons attacks, I'll be the first one to denounce him, to call him a war criminal, and to call for his prosecution in the International Criminal Court. Make sure that those consequences are there.
Pentagon. Barbara, what are you learning?
Good evening again, Anderson. We are now able to report that U.S. airstrikes have been launched against Bashar al-Assad's chemical weapons capability. We are being told by a senior official at this hour that approximately 50 Tomahawk missiles from 2 U.S. Navy warships in the Mediterranean launched earlier this evening.
Tonight, and I agree with Colonel Francona that this, if you're trying to link it to the attack and as well degrade capabilities, this was a good target to go after.
What we've seen is, in our meetings this week, we were told of the evidence, we saw the evidence, the president saw the evidence. All of that's naturally classified, and I'm sure when they can declassify that, they will. But
if that's indeed the case, what reaction do you think he was trying to provoke?
I believe, first of all, let me assure you, the information is very detailed about what kind of an airplane, what time it took off, who is the pilot. We have the name, we have the type of plane, we have the symbols painted on those planes, and we know what was loaded on those planes.
How do you know that? How do you know that?
The information is provided by the Americans by satellite, but to Syrians, I can assure you we have people on the ground.
I am James Satry. I'm campaign director of the Syria campaign. We're a very small organization of 3.5 people looking to try and engage people in Europe and North America primarily in what's happening in Syria to kind of positively impact the lives of Syrians, whether that's increasing the amount of aid that's being delivered, or if that's to do with improving the refugee situation, or if that's to do with pressuring for a kind of political solution. There's lots of different areas in which we try and apply pressure, and we do that through a whole bunch of different campaigns. For example, we're working with a group of people called the Civil Defense, these neutral, unarmed volunteer rescue workers who are digging people out of the rubble from barrel bombs, etc.
Now, the Syrian rescue group known as the White Helmets has sparked anger online after posting a video of them faking saving someone while doing the so-called mannequin challenge, the viral video trend in which people freeze in motion and are video recorded. Well, this footage shows the group's rescuers standing motionless, frozen over an apparently wounded man, and it does look realistic enough. So realistic, in fact, that it's raising serious questions about the authenticity of the White Helmets' other frequently posted videos. This particular video was deleted from the group's accounts a few hours after it was posted. There are plenty who regard the White Helmets as heroes of the Syrian war, but it also has a background that is somewhat dubious.
Do you know who finances them, how they operate, who are they supported by, what kind of organization they have? How do you get your information from them and so on?
Well, I can say we provide them with, well, I can tell you that we provide through USAID about $23 million in assistance to them.
Well, the company's chief executive, Ayman Asfari, joins me now. He owns around 18% of the company. Thank you so much for joining us. Now, you came out with results today, and actually you were saying that you had very limited impact on what's happening in the unrest on your results.
The Syria campaign is quite simply a PR campaign. And like most PR campaigns, their job is to push some sort of agenda. And the agenda that the Syria campaign has mostly is the White Helmets. They're responsible for trying to publicize the White Helmets in media mainly, but also in other ways, like through this recent documentary that came out, I guess, on Netflix. They are backed in large part by a billionaire, a Syrian UK billionaire whose name is Ayman Asfari. His wife also, I believe, sits on the board. And yeah, their basic reason for being is to try and push for a no-fly zone and thereby regime change.
Might end up making the situation worse if we launch airstrikes, if we against their airplanes, against hard targets on the ground. So we really need to step back and take a good look at this. The first casualty of war is the truth, and it's hard to know exactly what's happening in Syria right now. I'd like to know specifically how that release of chemical gas, if it did occur, and it looks like it did, how that occurred. Because frankly, I don't think Assad would have done that. It does not serve his interests. It would tend to draw us into that civil war even further.
Who do you think is behind it? Who do you think is behind it?
You know, you've got a war going on over there. Supposedly, that airstrike was on an ammo dump, and so I don't know if it was released because there was gas stored in the ammo dump or not. That's plausible. I'm not saying that's what I think happened, but
You're more inclined to believe the position of what Bashar al-Assad is saying and what the Russians are saying right now than more inclined to believe what even your colleagues here in the United States believe is truth, that this is Assad, and what human rights observers over there say is Assad?
To launch an independent investigation, to find out exactly what the facts are, who was involved and who was responsible, so that the appropriate consequences could be levied.
So, they all conclude that they have the evidence to back it up. They say Assad did it, his military did it. You don't believe them necessarily.
Well, last time I checked, Wolf, Congress had the authority and the responsibility for declaring war, for authorizing the use of military force. So whether the president or the Pentagon or the Secretary of
the absurdity of the Russian position. I mean, with a straight face, they are arguing that these chemical weapons are actually because of the rebels, which is absurd. And the third point is, Russia should be embarrassed and ashamed. They are the ones that are telling the world that there were no nerve agents, that there were no chemical weapons left. We know that for the better part of this year, Assad has been using...
UN envoy himself has said these are the aircrafts of the Syrian regime. There is not much question about that.
Dr. Kadmani, the UN Undersecretary said that as of now, UN has no information on the means of delivery. Nobody is disputing that there was an air attack at that location at that time. But whether or not those planes dropped the chemical bombs is still an open question. And UN does not have any information that was stated publicly by the Undersecretary. So what you're suggesting here is somewhat distorting the UN position.
And so forth. A month ago, he was sitting pretty. You had a president in the White House who said, we need this guy to defeat ISIS. We should be working with Russia. Wanted to pick a fight with Iran, but was very vague and ambiguous about it. How stupid can you be to launch sarin gas, a nerve agent that you were meant to have given up?
An announcement by the United States that they are going to abandon their regime change policy. That happened before this alleged chemical attack. There was also a conference, a major fundraising conference in Geneva where the Assad government was hoping to get funds for the reconstruction of the country. Now, you seem to believe that he would forgo all of that just to satisfy his compulsion of killing people with chemical weapons. But if you're ready to accept, if you're so ready to accept that, can't you entertain a thought that perhaps some other groups, like jihadi groups who concentrate in large numbers in the Idlib province, would benefit tactically much more from portraying Assad in such a way?
Look, I don't think we can discuss this attack any further. You are denying an absolute evidence on the ground. What I'm saying here is do not try to tell us that we are supporting the jihadis. We are the ones who want to fight the jihadis, and the regime is preventing...
The president says things that are not true. There are, I guess, two explanations. One, he's getting wrong information and then spreading it, or he's just deliberately not telling the truth.
Any president has ever made. Mike Pence could invoke the 25th Amendment because the President of the United States is a pathological liar.
And we reached the conclusion that that specifically was a lie and called it a lie because it's been corrected so many times, debunked so many times.
You know, it's sort of our job to let you know
when things are said that aren't true, especially by people you've elected. And this president keeps telling untrue things, and he does it every single time.
The 5 facts he uttered were just not true. Look, alternative facts are not facts. They're falsehoods.
As the crazy talk continues, standard rules of fact, truth, and reality have disappeared in this campaign. Donald Trump has piled such vast quantities of his trademark product into the political arena that the stench is now overwhelming. There was a pattern here and a term for a person who did this kind of thing: a bullshit artist.
That nobody in the media reports on that. There's a reason that nobody in the media reports on that. It's not true. There are not conspiracy theories. These are news stories sourced by government officials. Conspiracy theories are different. They're false. They're crackpot. They're nonsense.
According to the Washington Post, the New York Times, and the CIA has since determined it was all part of an effort to help Donald Trump, not simply to disrupt the election, but to help Donald Trump. And 17 national security agencies are in on this assessment. President-elect Trump says the hacking claims are all just sour grapes from Democrats, which is absolutely not true.
Without a doubt. I mean, and they feel it's an overwhelming success. It's no secret that this has been a very tough run for this president. He had approval ratings in the mid-30s, and now he has taken what they believe, this White House believes, has been decisive, very measured actions. They have listened to what the allies have been saying, praise from the UK, from Germany, from France. You heard what has been largely approval from members of Congress, even those who think that he should have had congressional approval, many of those folks still agreeing with him, and they think it sets the stage, sending a message that there is a new sheriff in town.
Al-Assad launched a horrible chemical weapons attack on innocent civilians.
Where he was. And what we seem to be seeing now is him trying to discover who he is in this office. And
we risk supporting an al-Qaeda affiliate. We also risk alienating other elements of the Syrian opposition, and that can be a significant blowback. However, I think that this was one of the major efforts that needed to be done right now in order to send a message to President Assad. And the fact that they sent this message at this point is really very, very important from the standpoint of actually telling him that he can go up to a certain point and then no further.
Or at least what the United States does and our allies do, frankly, quite well, is we self-regulate. We do subscribe to rules. There are laws of land combat, of how those domains of war and how we engage in those domains of war have rules, and we abide by those rules. Does it get nasty? Yeah, it gets nasty.
And I really believe that we should have and still should take out his airfields.
You know what's really good? President Trump changes his mind, which you guys don't think he ever does. And if he sees facts, can have him change his mind about things.
So, as I said, I think this is an important, decisive step that was taken. It is not a message. It is an actual degrading of the capability of the Syrian regime to carry out further chemical attacks against innocent civilians. No matter how you may feel about the president, I know there are people out there that don't support the president, but if you watched yesterday when he was standing next to the king as he spoke about it, that was real. That was not a politician up there talking. That was a real person who had just seen and heard and been briefed on this horrifying attack, and it clearly impacted him. I think you saw it again today. And I would say that I'll let them speak for their policy, but tonight's actions show that the days of being able to act with impunity are over when it comes to Bashar al-Assad, and that there is now an American president.
And I think this was a clarifying moment for him, and I think it's real, by the way. And for the good of our country, for him to understand that our great nation, with the values that we espouse and have, cannot stand for people to be chemical weaponed in this way. To me, that's very clarifying, and obviously I hope that he will keep his rhetoric low. In the past, one of those educational moments for him.
Now, I mean, you think you can make a compelling case that this was a lawful act under the U.S. Constitution, under any existing legal authority, international or domestic, by President Trump?
You know, I think this was, frankly, of quite dubious legality. I think it was also somewhat hypocritical, given Trump's previous comments about Syria, his opposition to strikes very much like this. I think it raises all kinds of difficulties ahead, and I think it was absolutely the right thing to do.
How do you square those two? How is it right if it could be illegal and that Congress should have been involved and you don't have any international precedent for this?
Because, I mean, all these arguments have been used all along in Syria, basically as a reason for passivity.
I think Donald Trump became President of the United States. I think this was actually a big moment because President Trump recognized that the President of the United States does have to act to enforce international norms, does have to have this broader moral and political purpose. President Trump realized, as every president has for many decades now, that presidents always believe they have inherent legal authority as commander-in-chief, and they don't need to go to a pesky Congress every time they want military force. The first time really as president, he talked about international norms, international rules, about America's role in enforcing justice in the world. It was the kind of rhetoric that we have come to expect from American presidents since Harry Truman. I think there has been an interesting morphing and a kind of education of Donald Trump.
There can be no dispute that Syria used banned chemical weapons.
But you're more inclined to believe the position of what Bashar al-Assad is saying and what the Russians are saying right now than more inclined to believe what even your colleagues here in the United States believe is truth, that this is Assad?
David and I are very pleased to be presenting the Oscars for both documentary short subject and live action short film. And the Oscar goes to, okay, The White Helmets.
Thank you to the White Helmets. You think the best policy for the United States right now is to do nothing?
Entities that we thought were relevant to our chemical weapons concern.
So why didn't it happen?
Because in the meantime, we were able to find a solution that actually removed the chemical weapons that were known from Syria in a way that the use of force would never have accomplished.
Even beautiful babies were cruelly murdered. No child of God should ever suffer such horror.